Hi, welcome to Story Mode, the place where you'll find the stories you've been waiting for. Today, we're continuing the story, How I Became the Greatest Mage Ever. Chapter 6, The Final Annual Assessment. Meditation efficiency varies from person to person. Some are naturally faster, others slower, but for the moment, let us set those individual differences aside. With the aid of the Stardust artifact, even those with inherently low efficiency can find themselves leading the pack. As for those who are both gifted and diligent, for them, the results would be nothing short of spectacular, achieving twice the progress with half the effort. "Uncle," Caleb asked, his voice tinged with excitement, "you mentioned to me earlier that students in the elite classes have a chance to be allocated a Stardust artifact. Is that truly the case?" "Yes. Since this is a school, naturally there are some cultivation resources available. However, the school's resources are extremely limited. With so many students across the entire campus, if every single person were to use them for even just a single day, the effect would barely be visible. It would be the same as having no resources at all. Therefore, the school have annual assessments, which decides who could get into the elite class. Only students in the elite class are granted the opportunity to use school resources like a Stardust artifact for a specific period of time. Based on your academic record, you should certainly be able to get into the elite class without any problems. Once you get into the elite class, I'll use my power to ensure you get to hold on to the school's Stardust artifact for a little extra time, which would be a great advantage for you. After all, the school is a place that strives for fairness, so I can't really tamper with things too much. What will truly provide a monumental leap forward for you will be the Stardust artifacts belonging to our own clan, the Luna clan, resources that normal people could never imagine nor have hoped to acquire in a lifetime. So, you must make sure to maximize these opportunity and resources we have." Eric spoke to Caleb with extreme amount of pressure. "Rest assured, Uncle, I promise I will not let you down." "It's no use saying that to me. You need to prove yourself to the family, the leader of the clan," Eric said, while patting Caleb on the shoulder. Caleb nodded emphatically, though inwardly he couldn't help but sneer. "Stephen Smith? So what even if you awaken lighting element? So what even if your cultivation speed is almost as fast as mine? I have the resources and power of the Luna clan behind me. You won't be able to stand a chance against me even in a million years." "By the way, how's that kid named Bryan doing?" Eric asked. "He's a complete waste of space. He should be expelled from the school soon." At this moment, Caleb felt absolutely no need to conceal the utter disdain he harbored for Bryan. Caleb heavily disliked Bryan. Although they had all technically grown up in the same neighborhood, and knowing each other at a very young age, they could have been great childhood friends. But Caleb couldn't stand Bryan. Not just because the difference between their family background, but more because that no matter where that boy Bryan goes, there always seemed to be a whole group trailing behind him. He was practically like a king in their group. What baffled Caleb even more was that the daughter of the clan leader Ashley Luna hung around them and shared a remarkably close bond with them. Who did he think he was? Running for all over the neighborhood and across the mountain every day like he owned the world. While he's living like a king, I have to work as hard as I can to achieve everything I had up till this point. Did he even have an understanding of what status his family is in? Did he have any concept of what true power meant? Did he understand what it meant to live a lifetime of laughable poverty, looked down upon by everyone? The son of a servant. That meant being lowly, being ignorant. He possessed absolutely no grasp of foresight or ambition. Instead, he seemed perfectly content to simply wallow in the filth of his slums and muddy streets. Haha, like I told his dumb father Bryce, I will only help him get into the school, but his son is a complete failure. Even if I gave him the chance to awaken, he still wouldn't be able to become a mage, and they insist on wasting money to take a chance at it. The problem is, when you yourself are such a pathetic, good-for-nothing loser, how can you possibly expect your son to be any better?" Eric laughed. With his eyes half-lidded, Eric at that moment resembled a noble, elegant old fox, an image that only served to further accentuate his disdain and mockery for such lowly creatures as the skunk. Student dormitory. Bryan, we should get going. It's the annual assessment. It wouldn't look good if we were late, Avery said. You guys go on ahead. I'm going to practice my control a little longer, Bryan replied. The guys in the dorm decided to leave Bryan alone and headed off to the assessment ground. Naturally, the examination would be in a classroom where students sat there and answered questions on a test paper. But in this magic world, the test was this annual practical assessment. To put it simply, the objective was to evaluate the progress each student had made in their cultivation over the past year since awakening their powers, thereby determining their placement in the major class reassignments to follow. Bryan was the last to arrive at the training ground. While this was the usual venue for their practical lessons, today the area had clearly been arranged differently. Aside from a semicircular table set up for the examiners, there was also a suspended star scent stone. The star scent stone resembled a large, black river stone, about the size of a watermelon, and at this moment, it rested atop a stone pedestal positioned at the front of the training grounds. This star scent stone was the single most important instrument for the students' assessment. The annual assessment was actually quite simple, much like the awakening ceremony they had undergone previously. Students merely had to place their palms upon the massive star scent stone, and the examiners could immediately gauge the students' cultivation progress over the past year by observing the intensity of the stone's glow. Much like the National College Entrance Exam, a student's destiny could very well be determined by this single verdict. In this world, too, there existed the same rigid criteria. Either you continued your studies to secure better opportunities, or you packed your bags and leave to find a different path in life. Remember when I told you that the intensity of your stardust's radiance reflects the level of magical energy contained within it? Class, now is the moment to show all your hard work over this past year. Let your stardust shine forth, declared their homeroom teacher, Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry. I think I'm going to fail and be asked to leave the school, said a girl with blue hair, her face is streaked with tears. Her nervous, anxious demeanor stirred up a wave of sympathy and pity among the surrounding classmates. How could that be? You have always been so diligent. Don't be so pessimistic. But I'm just so slow-witted. Even though I train as hard as I can every single day, my stardust still looks so faint, said the girl, whose name was Olivia Eve. Olivia, don't be afraid. You're going to pass. Stay confident, said Avery, trying to cheer her up. Thanks, Olivia replied. Before long, the 3 school administrators and the examiners finally arrived on the scene. The examiners were primarily drawn from the Office of Student Affairs, the department responsible for discipline, and were the very people the students dreaded seeing the most in their daily lives. All right, settle down. Several members of the Board of Directors will be inspecting today's annual assessment. I expect you all to fully demonstrate the spirit and demeanor befitting a true mage, Mr. Martin admonished the students. The examiners took their respective positions. The 1,500 students, hailing from 30 different freshman classes and clad in the uniforms of Skybird Magic High School, stood upon the training grounds in a magnificent display of force, arranged in a formation of tightly packed square battalions. As the tradition every year, the assessment began with a speech from the principal. Following that, the Board of Directors delivered their address. As Eric Luna stepped onto the podium and passionately painted a picture of a glorious future for the students of magic, Bryan, standing amidst the crowd, couldn't help but find it amusing. His speech was absolutely brimming with high expectations for the younger generation. Yet, in reality, Bryan knew Eric true personally than anyone else. Today is also a very special day. Therefore, we also have the most talented and outstanding mage of our Moon City with us today. The moment these words were uttered, the entire sports field, packed with over 1,000 students, erupted into a frenzy. Oh my God, is that really the talented Ashley Luna? That's not the point, okay? The real point is that she's also a stunning beauty, truly a woman of both exceptional talent and looks. Suddenly, the entire student body erupted into chatter. Just by their reactions, it was clear that none of them were strangers to the name Ashley Luna. They had never imagined that they would actually get to see this legendary magical genius during their annual assessment. Bryan, it's the little princess. It really is her. She actually came to our school." Avery tugged excitedly at Bryan's sleeve. Bryan craned his neck to gaze up at the podium. Sure enough, he spotted a beautiful figure standing there, proud and pure as a snow lotus. Despite the sweltering heat of the day, the woman standing proudly upon the podium appeared as if she had just stepped down from the snowy peaks of the heavenly mountains, a snow fairy who had wandered into the mortal realm. She was so ethereal and beautiful that she seemed utterly inviolable. As the entire student body and faculty watched this woman make her entrance, they were struck into a stunned, absolute silence. They had heard all the tales of Ashley's legendary reputation countless times, yet he had never actually laid eyes on her true form. Who could have imagined that she would truly resemble a goddess of the ice element at such a young age? Bryan himself found his gaze transfixed. This was the first time he had seen Ashley since that incident occurred. Had it really been 3 years? Back then, their whole group of kids loved to call her their little princess. Yet, after these 3 years, Bryan felt as though he could barely recognize her. She had changed, and changed profoundly. Once a relatively cheerful and approachable girl, now, in the full bloom of her youth, she somehow felt even more distant and unapproachable. Had her temperament truly shifted? Or was it simply that, as they matured, the vast disparity in their social standing had subconsciously fostered such a perception in his mind? "Bryan, you really should have just tried a little harder back then with the little princess." Avery sighed. "Did you bash your head against a toilet door and scramble your brains last time you cast the wind spell?" I'm just saying." Ashley's speech were brief. Bryan couldn't fathom what exactly had those boys so worked up. Listening to them, you'd think they were actually capable of getting into the Imperial Capital Institute themselves. The Imperial Capital Institute was, naturally, the finest magic university in the country. For a small city like Moon City, it was already considered a remarkable feat if even a handful of students managed to get accepted in any given colleges. Given such an abysmal acceptance rate, it was abundantly clear just how exceptional Ashley Luna, who had been granted special admission, must be to have enrolled directly into the Imperial Capital Institute without ever having attended a magic high school. That's like getting into Harvard without learning even a single year in high school. Bryan, you really need to buckle down these next 2 years and get yourself into the Imperial Capital too. Once you're at the Imperial Capital Institute, even if the Luna clan's power reach is long, they might not be able to interfere anymore. And when that happens, Avery said. As soon as Avery finished speaking, then that persistent, ghostly nuisance, Jack Landale, popped out once again. "Don't make me laugh. Once today is over, your great friend Bryan is going to be expelled from the school, and you thinks he's going to the Imperial Capital Academy?" Jack sneered. "Jack, are you out of your mind? When did Bryan ever offend you? Do you really have to jump out and yap like a stray dog every time we talk?" Avery had been putting up with Jack for far too long. After all, Avery was now one of the students that stand out in their class, one of the select few capable of casting magic. He couldn't fathom what right a pathetic scrub like Jack, who could barely control 6 stars, and barking in front of him. "He didn't offend me specifically, but I just can't stand the sight of shameless little lowlifes like him. I honestly don't get it. Where did you find the audacity back then to try cozying up to Lady Ashley? Know your place. Realize what a nobody you actually are, and stop indulging in such delusional fantasies. If it weren't for you, our families wouldn't have had our land confiscated," Jack shouted, pointing his finger right at Bryan's nose. Yeah, truly speaking, Bryan did get a little too close to the little princess of the Luna family, which did majorly impact the life of all the kids and families around them. According to the elders, this entire district once belonged to the Luna family, the true owner of the Moon City. Naturally, countless families like Bryan and Jack had joined and survived within their city. Jack harbored a deep grudge against Bryan. If it weren't for Bryan, he could have indeed been living a better life. Listen here, Bryan. Do you not have a single ounce of common sense? I've known for ages that there are certain people we simply cannot, and will never be able to, touch in this lifetime. It's better for everyone, both for yourself and your family, to simply keep your distance. But no, you just had to go test your luck. You actually thought a person like you could get with a princess? Not in a million years. Who the hell do you think you are? Do you think this is some damn novel or TV drama? Give it a rest. Jack pointed his finger at Bryan, unleashing a torrent of scornful contempt. Ashley's appearance on this occasion served to thoroughly ignite the resentment that Jack had long harbored deep within his heart. The foolish act Bryan had committed back then had dragged far too many people and far too many families into it. A princess is a princess. One should keep one's distance. This is no fairy tale. If you dare cross that boundary, the king, in a fit of rage, could simply raise taxes ever so slightly, yet plunge every hard-working farming family in the entire village or town into utter misery. Today, that dashing, middle-aged man standing slightly toward the back of the podium, his temples already touched with gray, is that very king. His name is Aaron Luna, a man with the power to make the entire city tremble with a mere stomp of his foot. And he is the man Bryan had provoked. One could even argue that the fact Aaron hadn't made Bryan's entire family live and beg on the streets by now was a miracle. "Jack, can't you just shut your mouth?" Avery shouted. "What? Is what I'm saying wrong?" Jack retorted. Bryan cast a brief glance at him. To be honest, his remarks actually took Bryan by surprise. This guy had a far clearer grasp of reality than Bryan had ever imagined. Indeed, some people only come to realize, usually much later in life, just how foolish they were back in school when they mocked classmates who had poor grades but came from stupidly wealthy families. Once out in the real world, those stupidly rich kids return from studying abroad armed with impressive degrees, casually land jobs paying tens of thousands a month, and still complain that the money isn't enough. Meanwhile, those who had toiled away to get into top-tier universities find themselves swallowed up in the vast sea of the workforce, living lives on a completely different plane, and a far lower one, than the very people they once mocked. Their ideals are ground down, their fighting spirit is extinguished. They push themselves to work as hard as possible, but yet remaining damn poor. The points Jack raised actually revealed a mindset far more mature than that of his peers. In truth, gaining a clear-eyed perspective on oneself early on is far better than blindly chasing after fantasies. Otherwise, when dreams inevitably crumble, brutal reality will, in an instant, strip you of everything you once envisioned, leaving you with a nightmare too unbearable to accept. Of course, Bryan saw no reason to admire Jack just simply because he had come to terms with reality in this way. On the contrary, he found it rather laughable. "Jack, you possess a real aptitude for being a dog, and the perfect mindset for it too. That is something I, Bryan Lambert, could never imagine in my entire life." "I'm impressed, truly impressed," Bryan retorted, firing back instantly. "And what the hell are you exactly? If I'm a dog, I'm a pedigree pooch, one that eats gourmet kibble, lives in a fancy villa, and wears designer threads. You, on the other hand, are nothing but a stray, a drowning cur, a dumpster-diving mongrel. Take a good look at yourself. Is there a single inch of your body that doesn't reek of the garbage heap you crawled out of? The most pathetic part is that, even now, you still don't realize just how foul you are. You just had to squander your family's last remaining asset just to get into this magic high school, only to get kicked right back out on your ass. I just want to ask your dad, Mr. Lambert, does he ever regret bringing you into this world?" "You're nothing but a shame," Jack continued. Bryan's earlier taunt had actually struck a raw nerve with Jack. However, Jack was no pushover. He simply embraced the insult, admitting that he was a dog, and immediately sank his teeth back at Bryan. Bryan glanced out at the crowd. Sure enough, his eyes locked onto a specific individual whose gaze flickered with a distinct look of schadenfreude. That person was Caleb. True enough, Back when they were younger, they were all just kids. Any act of revenge amounted to nothing more than throwing stones at someone's windows. Harmless mischief, really. But now, with the magic awakening and the subsequent magic assessment looming, people's fates are poised to undergo massive transformations. But Caleb, having finally risen through the ranks, has at last found his opportunity to strike back. Not bad at all. These kids, whom I used to beat like dogs back in the day, have actually learned how to play mind games now. I suppose all those years I spent parenting them didn't go to waste after all. Come on then, bring it on. Show me whatever tricks you've got up your sleeve. I, Bryan Lambert, have spent 100 years curing the world of internet, and I've never failed yet. I conquer others through sheer audacity, and I repay every single grievance in kind. All right, stop shouting. The assessment is about to begin. Anyone who makes a disturbance again will be disqualified. The bald examiner's imposing presence instantly dispelled all past grudges. I really want to know the expression on Miss Ashley's face when she sees you being expelled from Magic High School in front of the entire school. I think she'll regret ever wanting to elope with such a good-for-nothing, Caleb said quietly to Bryan, no longer needing to conceal his intentions. Your breath stinks. I can't stand the smell of shit. Don't come too close, Bryan said, blocking him with his hand. Caleb's lips twitched. Let this kid be arrogant for a while. Back then, he had pinned him down in the mud and beaten him mercilessly in front of Ashley, making him unable to hold his head high in front of her for the rest of his life, a humiliation that persists to this day. Today, Caleb would make this guy suffer an even more gruesome fate. To be publicly expelled before the entire student body, and right in front of Ashley no less, was a crushing blow. In a society where magic reigned supreme, how would Bryan endure the mockery? How would he bear the disdain in Ashley's eyes? And when he finally dragged himself back to face his father, Bryce Lambert, the father who had sold even their home just to afford his tuition at this magic high school, how on earth could he explain to him? It was a perfectly normal occurrence for underperforming students to be asked to leave following the annual assessments. Typically, such dismissals were not announced to the entire school. The institution was not so inhumane as to inflict that kind of public humiliation. However, there was one specific circumstance under which the school would publicly announce a student's dismissal: when a mage's stardust showed virtually no growth whatsoever. Under normal conditions, provided a student had successfully awakened their stardust and committed to daily cultivation, even the dullest of minds would see their stardust gradually brighten and their magical energy increase. The only exception was a student who was utterly, irredeemably lazy. To punish those who had squandered precious awakening resources and magic texts, and to drive home the message to the entire student body that cultivation was no child's play, nor merely a way to coast through life, the school would publicly announce the expulsion of any student whose magical proficiency remained unacceptably low. A school-wide expulsion notice of this magnitude is a rarity, perhaps occurring only once in an entire graduating class, and the school established this measure specifically to spur underperforming students into action. At the very start of the semester, the entire class underwent a preliminary assessment. At that time, Bryan's cultivation level was virtually 0. Now that the semester had drawn to a close, the time had come for the most solemn event of the academic year, the annual assessment. As expected, Bryan's cultivation level hovered perilously close to the threshold that would trigger a school-wide expulsion notice. Of course, just to ensure there were no unforeseen mishaps, Caleb and his uncle had prepared a grand gift specifically for Bryan. This gift was more than enough to guarantee that Bryan's qualification for the exit list, ensuring he would have the distinct honor of receiving a disciplinary penalty that the school hadn't invoked in 3 long years. Ashley and Aaron Luna were present as well, and they would witness this entire spectacle with their own eyes. Thinking of this, Caleb's spirits suddenly soared. Today was a day of dual significance, a day for him to showcase his own brilliance and embark on a meteoric rise to success, and simultaneously a day for that scoundrel Bryan to suffer humiliation and torment. What sheer delight! What absolute elation! The annual assessment has officially begun. All 30 classes across the entire school are undergoing the evaluations simultaneously. The testing process is actually quite simple. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd and the examiners, each student places their hand upon a star-sensing stone and concentrates their mind to enter a state of meditative focus. At this moment, the star-sensing stone emits a radiance that mirrors the intensity of the student's own stardust glow, thereby allowing their cultivation level to be judged based on the brightness of the light produced. Each student is allotted 3 attempts. Their final score is determined by the brightest radiance achieved across those attempts. Naturally, the more focused a student's mind is, the more accurately the star-sensing stone can reveal the true strength of their stardust. The testing order is randomized, and the first student to step forward for the assessment is none other than Olivia, the girl who had been worried and crying just moments ago. As she steps before the star-sensing stone beneath the collective gaze of the crowd, she appears incredibly self-conscious, looking as though she fears she might be expelled at any moment. "You may begin," the balding examiner announced. "Hey, Olivia, hang in there! All your teachers and classmates, we all believe in you," said Mr. Martin. Olivia timidly closed her eyes and placed her small hand upon the massive star-sense stone. The entire class fell silent in an instant, every gaze fixed upon the girl undergoing the very first test. They appeared even more nervous than the test taker herself. For some reason, Bryan sensed a subtle shift in Olivia's demeanor the moment the test began. Her expression turned solemn and earnest. Though she was clearly nervous, there was not a trace of panic in her bearing. A faint radiance gradually began to emanate from within the black star-sense stone. At first, it resembled a solitary streak of dawn breaking across the pre-dawn sky. Yet, as Olivia furrowed her brows in intense concentration, the light gradually spread to fill the entire stone, nearly overflowing with brilliance. A! 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 In that very instant, the 3 examiners called out their results almost simultaneously. "All right, student, that's it. Your final grade is an A," the balding examiner announced expressionlessly. Olivia opened her eyes, her face alight with a mix of disbelief and elation. Really? Is it really an A? I got an A?" Although the sight of a young woman squealing ecstatically, "I got an A! I got an A!" was undeniably bizarre, everyone had to admit that Olivia's exam results had left them completely stunned. Holy crap, an A! That's the standard for getting into the elite class." I'm speechless. Before the exam, she was over there blubbering. We all thought she was on the verge of being expelled. But then the results came out and, damn it, she tricked everyone and walked away with an A. She's a magic faker, a textbook example of a magic studying fraud. I'm never trusting her again. When the results were announced, even Bryan was left completely dumbfounded. Their homeroom teacher, Mr. Martin's expression stiffened slightly. He had actually been completely tricked by a student of his. Acting worried but receiving an A grade awarded in the very first assessment, even though Mr. Martin was, on the whole, quite pleased.